The government is poised to lift long-standing restrictions on genetic technologies in New Zealand, sparking debate whether this will bring cheaper, higher-yielding food or simply less oversight. The final decision by Food Safety Minister Andrew Hogarth is expected any day now, and while some farmers are keen to adopt the tools, others and critics warn that the move could come at the cost of the country's famed clean, green food image and high animal food safety standards. The new definition is proposed by the Food Standards Authority of Australia and New Zealand. If you hear me say FSANZ, that's what I'm talking about. I've given it a word. It hinges on whether there is any foreign DNA in the final product. So if a food has been gene edited but doesn't contain DNA from an unrelated species, then it's not genetically modified and won't have to be labelled as such. This is what the new proposed standards are. Food that contains foreign DNA must still be labelled as genetically modified. For example, the Impossible Burger that contains genetically engineered yeast. FSANZ argues gene editing presents a low risk as the foods derived from it are equivalent to those that could be created through natural mutations or conventional breeding. The authority has spent 5 years developing the labelling rules, which would apply, to across New Zealand and Australia. A spokesperson from GE Free New Zealand, Jon Carapiet, disagrees with the move, and he joins me now. John, a very good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leah. How are you?
I'm very good. I thank you for waiting patiently in the wings there. John, what is your major concern?
Well, there's two things. Thanks for the introduction. There's two things going on. Minister Hogarth is about to sign off, or hopefully not sign off, on this proposal by FSANZ to stop labelling of GM food. But there's also the gene technology bill going through Parliament, and that should be reported back tomorrow, or in at least the next couple of days, by the Select Committee. Now, the bigger thing is the gene technology bill, because that really does a lot of things like exclude from regulation the very gene-edited products you're talking about. So not only will there be no labelling, according to the food authorities, but there'll be no regulation at all, no independent testing. I guess, the phrase I'd use is that the chickens are being the fox is being left in charge of the chicken house, because the companies will be left to decide whether this is safe, whether it is actually what they think it is in terms of the genetic engineering. And it boils down to, as you said, actually, that there's this view, and it's very much an industry view, that because gene editing is so much easier, and it could be like nature, it could happen in nature, they don't want to regulate it and label it. Now, the problem of that is that these things are not natural. They have got unexpected effects. And yes, you could rely on the companies to check it more faithfully, but the history of relying on companies shows that's not a good idea. And so far, the contract with New Zealanders has been, if we're going to have GE food, and it is imported into New Zealand, nothing's grown here. But if it's coming in, it should be labelled. So whether you like GMOs or whether you don't like GMOs, you've kind of got the choice. And that choice is about to be taken away if this goes through.
Right. So that's why you say removing the labelling from gene-edited food. This takes away the right to choose, doesn't it?
Of everyone, both who want it and who don't want it. I mean, that was the battle that took place. You remember years ago, we had those big marches in Auckland and around the country.
Yeah.
And it was for the right to choose. There's never been a ban on GMOs. There has been strict regulations in New Zealand, which are being taken away by the gene technology bill. So at the moment, for example, if you're in Hawke's Bay, if you're in Northland, if you're in Auckland, actually, there's protections in the local rules, the local plans that say if you're going to play with GMOs in the open environment, either it's forbidden or you have to pay a bond to clean it up and pay for compensation if you contaminate somebody else's land or crop. Those protections are in the local government policies. Now, those are being taken away by the gene technology bill. The bill says you can't have precaution at the local level, so you can't have GE-free zones. It also says that the national regulator that's going to be in charge of all this doesn't have to be precautious either. And they're taking away the precautionary principle, as it's called, is like kind of opening us up for risk. And then that's where the labelling comes in, because if you're opening up our food industry for risk, and that's absolutely what the industry people are saying, Exporters don't want unlabeled GMOs. They want it traced and tested. So to deregulate these whole range of gene edited products is a real risk to the exporters markets as well as the consumer choice, because the risk is being transferred to the consumer and the food industry, because there's no insurance, there's no strict liability on the users of the GMO. It's been basically a bill written by industry for industry, and it's really forgotten the consumer and it's forgotten our export markets.
It's interesting because 80%, 85% of what we grow is exported. I struggle to think that the government would carte blanche a technology
Struggle is the
bill.
right word. Struggle
Yeah.
is very, and to be honest, Beef and Lamb, Fonterra, Dairy NZ, other industry players, number one, they asked for more time. They could see this dramatic bill coming through. And as I say, the dramatic thing of the bill is not so much what's in it, even though it misses out precaution, it misses out any ethical consideration, it misses out liability on the user to pay compensation. But it also misses out this group of gene edited products that have been just assumed to be safe. Now, every New Zealander, as far as I can see, says, well, whether you like it or not, case by case assessment of these organisms is probably where the line goes, and then labeling it so you've got a choice. They're taking away that case by case assessment. They're assuming that these products will be safe and that the companies are going to make sure they're safe. Now, as I say, I mean, the reality is that companies make mistakes. They're driven by profit. They're trying to get products out there. And it's happened before. We've actually had, in America, there was a gene-edited cow that was released onto the market, so it had no horns. And it was found after it went onto the market by the company saying it's all great, that it had unexpected, unwanted alien genes, including antibiotic marker genes. So those problems happen, these unexpected occurrences in the gene transfer, which wouldn't happen in nature. Nature kind of would weed them out. So they're opening up a box that's been closed in New Zealand for 20 years. We've got nothing growing in New Zealand. All our crops, all our fruit and vegetables, when you go to the supermarket, you can say if it's New Zealand grown, it's GE free. If that changes with these Fazan's rules, you'll be picking up a kiwi fruit and say, well, is this one of the traditionally bred ones or is it a GMO one? And we don't know. And that,
they're saying, but they're saying that if it contains foreign DNA, well, that would make it a GMO, wouldn't it? Not a gene edited.
right.
It would have to be labelled.
Yeah. So and what's happening is that most companies who are working on the global scheme, making GE or making GE foods, are actually moving from traditional GMOs to gene editing. And it sounds great because you're just going in and changing one gene. But the science says, and the independent scientists say, you've got to make sure that's the only thing you're changing. Yes, it's quite possible that there's these things called SDN1, which is like a small change in an organism. And it isn't just a plant. It could be an animal. It could be a microbe, a fungi, or a virus. They're allowed to do this. And as I say, these are excluded from regulation by the Gene Technology Bill because it's a small change. But the independent scientists say, well, a small change can actually have a big difference. And the way that gene editing works is there'll be some other changes in there by accident. It's highly efficient. I mean, gene editing, and especially things like CRISPR, are incredibly effective. They're very, very, they're not necessarily precise, but they're very targeted and they're very efficient. And that efficiency is so powerful that the independent scientists say you've got to go and check what you've done with this technology. And you certainly can't use the technology in the field by, say, spraying crops with gene editors, which is on the horizon. There's 200 patents by Bayer, which now owns Monsanto, looking at ways not just to do gene editing in the lab, but to do it in the field. And again, in the field, if you're using technologies like this, you're not just targeting the little insect or the little plant that you're trying to change, but you might in fact impact other plants and other insects and the soil by these sprays. That's on the horizon. And as I say, the Gene Technology Bill has really turned the social contract on its head. In New Zealand, you've got strict regulations, you've got labelling so people have a choice, and there's no GMOs out there.
No.
This bill will mean we won't know what's growing, farmers won't know what they're planting, there will be risk transferred to the consumer, and there's no precaution, and there's no labelling.
Are you genuinely saying, John, that this bill goes through, farmers won't know what they're farming, what they're planting? They'll have no idea. It'll be the wild, wild west. We'll have carrots growing legs walking out of the paddock.
Well, hopefully not that, but that's what they're saying, that we've got to have traceability of these new products. That's what's happening all over the world. And a really interesting thing is that the argument that there's no foreign genes, there's no frog genes in this tomato, doesn't stand up scientifically. And the European Court of Justice, because this debate's going on in the UK, in Europe and the UK as well. And just to be clear, the European Court of Justice was asked to decide, are these gene edited products needing to be regulated like GMOs, or can they be just forgotten and ignored? And they decided very clearly that these are GMOs because the technology is different. The technology is not like nature. It's like a bit like nature because you're breaking up genes and reconfiguring them. But nature does that in a very different way from the very powerful technology. So that, and unfortunately, there have been no major food issues with the regulations we've had in New Zealand. So over the last 20 years, where we've had imported GM food coming in, there has been no major scare that we know of that has caused harm. And that's because we've got these regulations. You have to check these products. And that being taken away is a real unusual decision for New Zealand, because our exporters are saying we make about $20 billion a year added value by being GE free. Unless you trace and contain and stop these gene edited products contaminating the main food supply, we're in trouble.
Look, I find it interesting because, I mean, I've got to put my hand up, John, and say I have not gone through the gene technology bill line by line. So, I mean, I can only, take what you're telling me. I do struggle to think that the government is literally signing away billions of dollars potentially and imploding our produce. I don't see why. Have they not thought of this? Well, okay, I'll ask another question. Why then are they doing it if you foresee a collapse in our clean green image, potentially losing billions of dollars? Then why are they doing it? What do they want to see?